We do have some really wonderful people joining us today who are going to be supporting us along the way, and that's going to be our chat resource person. So that's Anela Lonnie, and then of course Kristen Mills, and you'll see them up there as our panelists. They're going to be here to providing support in our chat, but also as a resource in case you are in the wrong room at the moment or if you are needing any additional support. We do have virtual hallways in case there's any information that comes up and you just need a little bit of emotional support. Please message one of us. We'll go ahead and provide you with that link to go over to get that confidential and private support if needed. We are very thankful that we are joined today by our speaker who so graciously agreed to join us. I am going to do my absolute best to do my introduction, but just a little bit of a warning. I am from the Appalachian Mountains, and so sometimes my pronunciation is not magnificent, but I'm going to give it my best try. Please feel free to correct me in any way needed. But we are joined today by Kaʻanohi Kalama-Macomber. She is a mother of 3 and a Kumu Hula from Koʻolaupoko, Oʻahu. She is the Hopena A education specialist for the Hawaii Department of Education, Office of Hawaiian Education. Before coming to the department, Kaʻanohi worked for a local ʻāina-based nonprofit as a community organizer and educator. It is her hope to be able to support the department in building stronger connections between schools and their communities in order to make learning more relevant and ultimately more meaningful. Without any further ado, I am very grateful and humbled to be able to pass it over to our presenter today.
Mahalo so much. Ano ai kako. I am Kaʻanohiokalā Kalama-Macomber, and I'm so honored to be able to be here with you folks today in support of all of the beautiful work that all of you do for our lahui and for each and every one of the kaiāulu that you represent. Mahalo kako. I'm going to go ahead and put my slides up so we can get started because time is not our friend today. As it was mentioned, I am the education specialist for Hopena A with the Office of Hawaiian Education. And a lot of our work is really centered around bringing back the essence of Hawaii, not just to our formal education system, but wherever learning and teaching occurs, right? And getting everybody to recognize that Hawaii is truly abundant. And there are gifts in each and every one of us and in all of our places. And if we just tap into those, what a richer culture we would have, and what a more thriving lahui we would have as well, a more thriving community, more thriving Hawaii. Today, my talk is really going to be focused on how do we strengthen, how do we utilize na Hopena A and the pillars of Ha to really strengthen communities through a strengthened sense of breath, belonging, responsibility, excellence, aloha, total well-being, and Hawaii. So I know that we have maybe about, looks like a few of us on. If I can just ask, I know that it's a webinar, and so, oh, kalamai. So chat is not, there we go. Chat is going to be our form of communication today. And so I'm going to ask us to first set sacred space with one another by uplifting 3 inoa, 3 names. So if you wouldn't mind just typing in the chat 3 inoa that you see on the screen. The first one is going to be your name. The second is going to be the name of someone that, the name of your ʻāina, the name of your place. This could be where you laid your head last night. This could be where you're from, but you no longer live. This could also be a place that you hold near and dear to your heart. And the third name is going to be the name of somebody that you channel in the work that you do. So when you think about why you're here today, who is it that you bring with you into this space? It can be somebody who has passed on. It could be somebody who is very much in the living. It could be a child or a kupuna. And so go ahead and take a moment. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, they can help you get to the right room. Go ahead and take a moment to type your 3 inoa, your 3 names in the chat. Your name, the name of your ʻāina, your place, and the name of somebody that you channel in the work that you're doing. Mahalo. Okay, so we see here that we have Hoa from Hilo, bringing tutu with them. Wailuku, Kaʻanohi, Maui, Kailua, Oʻahu by way of Wailuku, Kealakekua, Hawaii Island. Mahalo, 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 Wendy, for sharing. Yeah. Hana, Ka'uhanehemolele. Yep, mahalo. Mahalo to all of you. O Kapolei. Mahalo to all of you for uplifting those names. Continue to populate it in the chat. Yeah. If we were in person, I would be asking all of you to share that and uplift those names into the space that we're in, that we're sharing together. And part of the reason for this is truly to set safe, sacred space, right? I just came from Sherry's presentation where she was talking about the importance of setting that safe space, right? No matter what we're doing, needing to take the time to create that safe space. And we can do that by making sure to bring our multiple stories into that space. When you uplift these names, you tell the people that are reading it, that are seeing it, that are hearing it, and you tell the spaces that they are being uplifted in, that you trust them and you're entrusting them with all of these things that you hold near and dear. When we receive the names that people are uplifting, we're telling them that we will care for these names, we will care for these people, we will care for these places through the aloha that we share back with one another, right? Freely giving and receiving, not always being the ones to take and give nothing in return, but also not feeling like you always need to be giving without anyone else helping to replenish your cup. So mahalo nui again for uplifting these names. When you share your name, you are giving us a little glimpse into the mo'olelo of who you are, the hopes and dreams that your ohana have for you or may have had for you when you were coming into this world. You tell us your mo'oku auhau, all of that by just uplifting your inoa, your name. Yeah? When you say the name of your aina, of your place that you hold near and dear, you're telling us about these spaces that have truly impacted your life and have nourished you and nurtured you over the years so that you are able to be with us here today. And when you uplift the name of somebody that you channel in the work that you do, you're really sharing with us that nobody comes to these spaces alone, that we all have individuals in our lives who have impacted us in a way that allow us to continue on, that allow us to truly strive to be who we want to be, and to do the things that we want to do, who have impacted us in our lives in a way that made such a difference, and allow us to really show up in the way that we are showing up here today. So again, mahalo for uplifting all of those inoa and for giving me, as well as our friends who are on this call, a little glimpse into your multiple stories, your multiple mo'olelo. Na Hopena A is all about mo'olelo. It's all about sharing stories, tales, myths, genealogy, succession of the spoken word, right? This is the definition from our dictionary of mo'olelo, the multiple definitions of mo'olelo. But ultimately, mo'olelo is what allows us to determine why we do what we do, how we're going to do it, and who we're going to do it with, right? Mo'olelo is a connection to our kupuna, to the history of the past, in order to inform our present and how we want to innovate in the present, to leave a lasting legacy in the future, right, for generations to come. Na Hopena A tells us that we must first uplift the mo'olelo that matter for our communities in order to establish pilina, in order to establish connections, relationships that truly matter and are meaningful, right? These aren't relationships of just, oh, you're my friend, I'm your friend. But these are true connections to things where we feel it in our na'au, where we feel a sense of responsibility over it because of the pilina that we've created with it. Pilina to each other as humans, pilina to our aina, to our spaces, our physical spaces, pilina to the ao, pilina to the realms that we find ourselves in, right? This pilina cannot truly happen though if we're not sharing mo'olelo. Right? So I see some in the chat saying, hey, are you this one with this last name, right? Because you recognize names that you see in here, you recognize places. There's people from multiple communities and multiple people from the same community, right? And so when we uplift our stories, we invite people to establish relationships with us. right? We're telling people that we're interested in establishing a relationship with them in a way that matters for us, not in a way that's prescribed, not in a way that anybody else tells us we need to develop these connections, but really in a way where we can find those multiple connections that allow us to go deeper with one another and create experiences that are truly meaningful. I'm going to share this video for you folks. And as I share it, I want to just ask that you think about what's really standing out for you. Yeah, what is really standing out for you with regards to the messages in this video. And you'll notice that that some of it is talking about school setting. And I know that many of you on this call are not in the formal industrial setting of a school setting, but wherever it talks about school, just think about your community, think about your practice, think about what this might look like in your space, okay? So I'm gonna share this video. And for those of you who have seen it already, I want you to look at it through a different lens. Look at it through the lens that brought you here to this conference today, right? What are the connections you're making to the mo'olelo that you're developing in the work that you're doing today? Okay. Just give me a moment. And if I can just get a thumbs up from those I can see that you can hear the video.
Oh, yes, perfect.
Growing up in Hawaii, it's often very difficult to contextualize the education that was given to us or to place the concepts of Western learning into this way we live. How do we help kids contextualize the learning we're trying to give them with the place around them, with the honua?
What is Ha?
It's the sharing of the breath of life, and it's a sharing of love, actually, caring for each other and caring for the earth.
People ask, what is Ha in terms of na Hopena A. The first thing that I think of are system outcomes.
This strength and sense of belonging, it is very important to me that each one of my haumana know who they are, where they come from, where they live.
We are unique in Hawaii. Whether you were born here or not, you are part of it, and we all have a chance to contribute to it. In implementing the framework, we may find a common thread in other ways, in other parts of our lives, that we haven't already done.
You feel a kuleana to that place. You want to work hard and bring your best to make that place better. It's what's essentially Hawaiian. And I work to make that experience for my students. Seeing their smiles and seeing them all pili, all one, that exemplifies what Ha is all about.
Excellence. On a personal level, I'm always striving for that. Looking at our mo'olelo and just really the way my kupuna are and how we've been raised, excellence is central to a lot of what we do.
Hulawan ho'ohana mako ya aloha, ua a'o kamako kumu ya mako, a ku'oha no ano akahai, la no lokahi, o no olu, he no ha'aha'a a o ahonui a, ua a'o lako ya mako I kia no ka mea o ke aloha, ka mea nui, ma ka ohana a me ma wahua e o ka hula.
From the smallest component of the youngest children all the way up to the kupuna, we have a happy and healthy community. We have a community where people are safe, where they are nurtured, where they have what they need to live, that they have food, shelter, clothing, education, that they have work that's meaningful to them and helpful to the community.
Something that's even more important than the art itself is really the connection. Knowing that between Nalani and Honua is Kanaka. And that's our role, is between, we're the conduit. We connect those energies. Helping the kids to align their three piko and be one with all of that makes them better able to listen to the ʻāina.
Creating a framework where every single community can figure out what works best for them, where teachers and haumana are all a part of creating a pathway, a framework that makes things work best for our students.
The promise that I see is generational abundance. This sense that we work together to create not just survival for our community, but true thriving, that is generational because it's something that is a legacy that I passed down to my children, that I inherited from my kupuna, but generational in that it continues to create more of itself.
Now's the time to implement something, to save something that is Hawaii, so that we all have Hawaii. And if we could return 30, 40, 50 years from now, that we would recognize a place that we would choose to live in, that we would still choose to live in Hawaii 50 years from now.
Okay, mahalo. So I'd like to ask you folks to just take a moment and just type in the chat something that's resonating for you from that video. A thought, a quote, a message that you received from that video. Just go ahead and populate it in the chat. And as you folks are doing that, I want us to think about what they mean by generational abundance, right? What do we mean when we're saying that which is essentially Hawaii? And when the complex area superintendent states at the end of the video, now's the time to do something that'll give back to Hawaii. So 30, 40, 50 years from now, we still have Hawaii to call home. We still choose to be here in Hawaii, right? What does that mean? What does that look like? How do we know that we're doing it, right? How might that fit in all of your practice that you folks do? How might it show up? What are the impacts that we have and the abilities and the gifts that we have in our communities to help support that, uplift that for multiple generations to come? Na Hopena A is in the school system, not by mistake, but really because this is where our keiki are. Now, if we want thriving communities, we need to make sure that we're putting the work into our keiki, right? And we're putting the commitment into creating learning environments, into creating life environments that truly help them to recognize their own personal value in relationship to the benefit of the collective whole, right? Yeah, keep populating it in the chat. I see Aloha, right? That breath that continues to live on, it goes long, it grows roots, it extends, expands, it multiplies. Aloha, connectivity with one another, play space. You know, there's all of these new buzzwords in education, new and old buzzwords in education. And people come to me and they say, oh, we do place-based education, we do project-based education, this, that, and the other. And I said, okay, all of that in Hawaii is Hawaii-based education, right? If we're going back to the foundational root systems of what makes this place special, and what makes it the place that all of us choose to live in, that is that sense of Hawaii, the values embedded, right? The values embedded in this, the multicultural historical context embedded in this place, right? That is learning from our ʻāina, learning with our communities, a village raising a child, and so on and so forth. I wanna ask you folks to please take a moment, and I'm putting it in the chat, www.menti.com, just on your own computers, if you can go to that, www.menti.com, and it'll ask you to put in a code, 6875-2661, and answer this question. What are the conditions and attributes that make Hawaii truly unique, unlike any other place in the world? What is it about this place that is unique? unlike any other place in the world. Go ahead, go ahead and take a moment to go to the Mentimeter and populate that. Yeah? You're going to www.menti.com 6875-2661. We see here the aloha, the people, the place. What else makes this place unique? What are some of the attributes and some of the conditions that we find here and we don't find it in New York City? You do. The true sense of ohana, acceptance, loving you where you are. The beauty of the ʻāina, yeah, the regenerative power of the ʻāina. I don't know how many of you are following the news, but our lahui, our communities has been going through a lot of loss lately, a lot of very impactful loss. Yeah? But ʻāina is telling us that we will regenerate and we will thrive and continue to create anew, right? Halima'u is going off and it's beautiful. He Hawaiʻi, aloha, culture, connection, the kāko'o, the people, deep connection to ʻāina as part of life value. Yes, continue to populate that Mentimeter. Yeah, I'm going to be sharing this back out with the Mental Health Hawaii staff, and they're more than welcome to give these results back to anybody who's registered for the conference so you can see some of these attributes. But I ask you folks to uplift this because Hopena A is all about conditions. It's not about the lesson that we're actually teaching the student and the actual content of the lesson. It's about the context. It's about the feelings we set in our environments, whether it's in the classroom, in our homes, at our ʻāina education spaces, in our counseling sessions, in our spaces of support. No matter where we are, the conditions we put in place to receive people and to retain people and really sustain a practice, they matter, right? So if we're saying that all of these attributes that you folks lifted up on this screen are really important and it's what makes Hawaii unique, do we see this showing up in our spaces and our practice? Are we prioritizing this in the way that we do what we do? Mahalo Mona, attitude, yes. Are we prioritizing all of these things in everything that we do? Right? Nobody put on here that what makes Hawaii truly unique is our percentage rate of this, that, or the other, right? Nobody put here anything about standard-based education, prescriptions, medical stats, none of that stuff, right? What makes Hawaii unique are these unseen, right? Not really very tangible, but felt in our na'au type things. So how do we create environments and conditions that really allow this to happen? Hopena A asks us to really take a look at those conditions, right? To really take a look at the way that we set things up for people to really feel welcomed into spaces and into practices and feel like they have something to offer, right? Something to contribute. Just a little snippet of the mo'olelo of Ha. It came to the Department of Education. The conversation started back in 2010 when they're really, struggling with Race to the Top, No Child Left Behind, and all of this stuff. And the gap, the achievement gap was widening, the mental health gap, the social emotional learning, all of that was widening. And we're really struggling, and we still are in some respect, right? But they noticed that something needed to change. And so there was a group of people who came together and started talking about what is it that we need to put in our school systems that can help to be a model for the rest of our Hawaii systems in order to bring back that essence of Hawaii. And some of the conditions that they were fighting against was just really success was only about the individual, right? We only care about you, not how you affect anybody else or how anybody else affects you. But if you lose, it's your fault, and that's all there is to it, right? Measuring academic achievement only. We don't care that your ohana just had an amazing harvest. Not we don't care, but great, your ohana just had an amazing harvest over the weekend and you were able to feed your whole community, but that's not going to give you an A in my class. Right? When our class is about sustainability, it's about science functions and ecosystems and all of those things, which are all functioning practices in a successful lo'i, right? But you're not going to get an A in my class, or you're not going to get the money that you need from the federal government to continue on, because you got to do it by this rubric. right? And so what was happening was the impact in our education system, particularly lack of heart, teachers teaching to the tool. And you see that in our system too, people passing laws, passing legislation just to get by, just because, right? Just because someone else away from Hawaii is saying that this is what you need to be successful. We forgot to listen to the mo'olelo of our communities and to truly honor the mo'olelo of our communities. The work that we did at the beginning of this session is seen as like wasting time, right? Sherry was talking earlier about the need to talk story. Talking story, we learn so much about people, so much about one another, right? And we learn so much about our practices and the decisions we need to make because we're building relationships. And when we build relationships, people open up more. People want to be a part of it more, right? Superficial implementation and then a turning inward. Schools and businesses were not integrating community as regularly as they should have been, right? So what they realized, what was missing from our education system and our state systems here in Hawaii is really the sense of Hawaii. All of the things that everybody talked about earlier this morning in your guys' sessions, everything that makes Hawaii essentially Hawaii, all of those attributes that you folks listed earlier in that Mentimeter. That's what's missing from our systems, right? Kau'i Keauli said, "He aupuni pala pala ko'u." Mine is a nation of education. Not because everybody had degrees, not because everybody could write a 500-word essay, right? For one reason, because 91 to 95% literacy in written and spoken language, right? And reading, but also because of the reason why we had that level of literacy, right? The practice of our people, the way that we did things here in Hawaii, that attention to detail, that sense of work ethic that was embedded in every single thing that we did here. That is how we were able to become that 91 to 95%, almost 100% literate. Yeah, the highest percentage in the world at that time, right? That's how we were able to become that. Not because somebody gave us a textbook and said, read, 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 read. But because each and every one of our ohana were able to look at the content through the lens of their kuleana, of their hana, of their family, of their communities, right? When we're interested in something, when we're connected to something, we're gonna want to do more of it, right? There's a lot of surveys out there for kids, and a lot of them, when they talk about health for kids, they say if a child knows knows where their food is coming from and is a part of growing it, they're more likely to eat it. Yes. Because if they took care of it, then they bought into it. They care about it, right? So they're going to want to try it out. They might not like it, but they still want to try it, right? And they're more willing to eat that than something that they know nothing about, that they don't see in any other part of their life. And so if we know that that's true, why are we expecting the opposite of all of our systems? Why are we expecting them to feel open and feel willing to open themselves up to learn and to teach, if they don't see themselves in that learning and teaching? Na Hopena A literally means the end goals of learning, but figuratively, it's that reciprocity, right? It's that coming together as a lahui to freely give and freely receive, and understand that each and every one of us are in a space of teaching and learning in every experience. Even though our job might call us a teacher or a counselor or a manager or a director, whatever it may be, we are all in a space where we're meant to be learning, right? And so how do we create opportunities where everyone feels a sense of belonging to that responsibility, right? Where we're uplifting those things that really matter, so we feel safe enough to flatten the hierarchy and have everybody komo i kahana together, enter into the work together. Martina, you have a question. Kalamai, I can't see any of the hands raised when I'm in this. Martina, you want to go ahead and ask your question? Oh, okay. All right. Well, if you think of one, feel free to just put it in the chat. I can't see your hands raised, but I can see the chat. And I am looking at it every so often. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to just throw it in the chat. Okay. Na Hopena A, the framework that this group came up with, is really one that emphasizes breath, right? Ha, literally meaning breath or to breathe, that life force that sustains everything here in Hawaii and beyond in our world, right? Where breath, the acronym breath stands for belonging, responsibility, excellence, Aloha, total well-being, and Hawaii, right? One of the things that is really, really important when we're looking at this sense of breath, it's that inhale and exhale, and understanding that in every changing environment that we find ourselves in, our breath is going to be different. It should be different because we're having different experiences. And so we need to be okay with that. And we need to make space for people to acclimate themselves to the context and the changing context that they're coming in, right? That's why getting to know those mo'olelo, those stories of one another are really, really important. Auntie Puanani Burgess talks about building the beloved community, which is really centered around this sense of belonging, knowing who I am in relationship to everyone and everything around me, knowing my names and everything that it represents, knowing my communities, and knowing the value that I have in this ohana, in this classroom, in this space, right? In this space of engagement. Belonging tells us that we really stand firm in that sense of identity, right? And that it's a relationship that cannot be undone because it's a meaningful relationship. So no matter what you give me, I will carry it forward beyond this space because I am connected to it, right? Belonging is asking us to create environments like this where people from all over the world can come to it and feel like they're home. No matter where they're from, they feel like they're home because the doors are open, right? The metaphorical doors are open because space is being allowed to be nurtured. People are being allowed to show up as they are, who they are in the way that best suits them, right? And there's a place for everyone in this hana. So how do we utilize all of the beautiful work that our community does to serve as that running metaphor for the work in our office spaces and in our practices, right? When we go to a space like this, right, on west side of Oʻahu, we feel welcomed, even though I'm from Waimanalo, right? No matter what, we feel at home. How do we create environments where everyone sees him or herself as part of the mo'olelo and truly feels nurtured in those spaces? Responsibility for Ha is telling us that in working one learns, when we show initiative, we truly acquire that learning, right? And that we're going to carry our responsibility as it is our privilege. Yeah. So this one's really important in getting us to recognize that nobody's going to see any kuleana as a privilege if they don't first feel a sense of belonging to that kuleana. You're going to start to notice that the pillars of breath don't stand alone, that they depend on one another, the same as you and I, right? We depend on one another. We can never stand alone and do this life thing all by ourselves. And so how do we create spaces where people can freely depend on one another in the most positive and the most healthiest ways, and support one another and be those kako'o, be that pa, like the Hale Sherry was talking about earlier, right? Be that foundation and those po that hold one another up, yeah? The naki'i that bind us. Responsibility for Ha is telling us that we are going to do this together no matter what. This may not be my ahupua'a, but I'm going to walk back and forth across this auai 150 times if I have to, because I know that in doing this, I'm putting just a little bit of mana into this greater purpose that will come back and serve my future generations, right? So it is my honor to be able to be doing this work with all of you. Right? It is my honor to be able to be doing this, this thing that I truly know in my heart is what's best for myself and the greater collective. So when we think about our kuleana and the roles that we play in our communities, it can get very overwhelming sometimes. Where do you go to reconnect to your mo'olelo, to your purpose, to your why, to that pilina that brought you to that work in the first place, so you can reestablish that sense of privilege and honor and reset yourself to holomua forward. Excellence tells us that there's no success without preparation, that we're going to persevere along the appropriate path with the right tools and skills necessary to truly achieve our very best, right? This is one of my favorite olelo no'eo, a'ohe ulu e loa'a I ka po kole o ka lau. If you know anything about Hawaii, you know it's all about food. Metaphors are about food. Literal conversations are about food, right? It's about feeding, both metaphorically and literally, right? Figuratively and literally. How are we continuing to feed? But that we cannot feed our lahui without the right tools. This Olelo no ea says you're not going to get the ulu if you go with the short pole, right? So literally, you cannot pick the ulu if your pole's too short, if you're not prepared for what you're about to do, right? But you cannot get prepared for it if you don't first feel connected to it. If it's not your forte, if that's not your thing, right? Excellence for Hopena A is telling us to take a look at gifts, take a look at a strengths-based system where we no longer are focusing on the deficits that people come into our spaces with, but the gifts that they bring with them, the abundance that they bring with them, allowing our children and our adults and our kupuna and everybody and our places to truly see the value that they have for the collective whole, right? And that every single one of us and every single one of our spaces has something to offer. Auntie Puanani Burgess tells a story about a boy that she asked to share his gift, and he gets really upset and goes on to say, like, don't you know that's why I'm in this stupid class? I don't know any of that stuff. I don't know that science. I don't know that math stuff. How dare you ask me this? Yeah, why are you gonna embarrass me like that? And she fast forwards to say that she sees him in a supermarket and he tells her that he thinks he figured out what his gift is. And that gift for him is that he can call the fish. So it's his kuleana to feed his family. And he calls the fish, and every time the fish come, right? Every time he calls the fish come, and he's able to go feed his family, right? So she asked us to think about what would a system be like? What would a world be like for this young man if he was allowed to look at everything through the lens of his gift? He's like a junior or senior when he's saying this, right? So he's made to think that he has nothing to offer for his entire life, and doesn't realize that just because his offering doesn't look like what they're putting in the textbooks or what they're saying on the news or on the advertisements, it doesn't mean that it's any less than, right? So how do we take the time to get to know his story? So when we see him struggling, we use that story as a point of reference to get him back on track, right? When he's in the classroom, when he's seeing us for social, emotional, or mental support, we're telling him, remember, when you talked about this, it took a lot of grit for you to stay there when that mano was coming next to you and you not freak out. What was it that allowed you to be so balanced and grounded in that situation? Now, how do we translate that to the situation you're in right now here with us, right? And immediately the light bulb will go on for him because it's something that he connects to, something he's passionate about, something that's important to him. Yeah? Do you know what your gift is? Do you know the gifts of the people around you? Are you assembling those gifts for the best possible outcome for everyone, right? And realizing that we don't need to hold all of the gifts within ourselves. We shouldn't. We should open up the space for other gifts to show up in our lives from other people and other places in order to truly develop that kayaulu, yeah? That foundation, that space that allows for growth to thrive. This picture here of the hale is a reminder to us that there's kuleana in every single facet of building a hale, and no kuleana is less important than the other. Yeah, if you're afraid to climb all the way to the top, that's okay. You're gonna come and oki kaula over here. You're gonna come cut the cordage over here. And no, that's not a lesser job, because if you know anything about building hale, if the cord is too short, you ruin the whole integrity of the hale, right? So you have to have precision. You have to be able to be meticulous and mayau. Yeah, if that's your gift. This is where you can truly thrive, right? So getting everybody to take a look at all of the multiple opportunities to share their gifts in every setting that they come into, but also utilizing those gifts as a way to start the conversation and a way to bring us back into a positive space. Aloha tells us that we do things with love, so good results may fall upon ourselves, our community, and our world. Really, Aloha is asking us to remember Auntie Pilahipaki's breaking down of Aloha into its 5 facets, with the A being akahai, Hawaiʻi meaning kindness, to be expressed with the feeling of tenderness. The L being lokahi, Hawaiʻi meaning unity, to be expressed with the feeling of togetherness. O, olu, Hawaiʻi meaning to be agreeable, to be expressed with this feeling of understanding and welcoming openness. H being ha'aha'a, to be expressed with the feeling of humility and modesty. And the last letter A, ahonui, patience, to be expressed with the feeling of perseverance, right? And when we say aloha, when we say we're living aloha, when we tell someone we have aloha for them, or we feel the aloha spirit, what we're really saying is that we are committed to all of those 5 characters of the word, right? And through the working together, through maintaining open doors and always trying to be kind and humble in everything that we're doing, recognizing that there's so much more room for all of us to grow, we will truly persevere. But aloha isn't always pretty. Aloha requires sacrifice. Yeah, aloha requires really digging deep and enduring a lot. And that is how we truly persevere. That's that aho nui. It's not just about making time patience. It's about digging deep, enduring whatever may come our way together, trusting in that process together in order to persevere, right? So aloha is telling us, how are we creating conditions where this is the rule? This is what we live by, right? And we're constantly trying to strengthen it, putting intentionality around it, where no matter how busy we are in our day, we're going to take the time to make sure that these keiki learn it correctly the first time. Yeah, because that time that I missed today, because I spent it with them, will be made up years from now, right? Because I won't have to go back to it with them. They'll learn it right the first time. They'll learn the values the first time, and they will continue to grow through that. Yeah, I can make a little bit of sacrifice for the betterment of this collective whole, for the betterment of the future generations here in Hawaii. That's aloha. Yeah? So how are we making sure to give it no matter what? Because when we do, we know it will be reciprocated. Yes, Vernon, aloha mai, aloha aku, yes. Total well-being is really this sense that we're going to nurture mind, body, and spirit, right? And all of our relationships to have a holistic, healthy life. Total well-being for Ha is asking us to really pay attention to those three people, right? Our connection to our past, our connection to our present, and our connection to our future. And take the moment to do those self-checks where we ask ourselves, would our kupuna have made this decision? And if not, why are we doing that? Why are we doing it? What's the mo'olelo that tells us whether or not this is okay? If we make this decision right now, how is it going to impact my family that I'm living with, that I'm around, my community right now? And then if I make this decision, what kind of legacy will it leave behind, right? So making sure that every single decision we're making in our lives, we're using mo'olelo, past mo'olelo, present mo'olelo, and the mo'olelo that we're currently creating for the future to determine whether or not we should be doing it. And if it's what's in our best interest as well as the best interest of everyone around us. And then we're also holding each other accountable for that by supporting one another, saying, I'm going to check with you, right? I'm going to be there with you and we will go through this together. We'll determine this together. Total well-being is asking that if any point in time we ask ourselves those questions, if any point in time we ask ourselves those questions and the answer is no, this isn't going to be what's best and we don't know where to go from there, how are we building in supports by assembling all the gifts of our community to uplift one another and get us back on the right path, right? How do you folks get that sort of support? How do you give it? Total well-being for Ha is asking us in this concrete jungle, what is going into all of these mea kanu that is allowing them to thrive so much, right? How do we nurture in this way that no matter what the conditions are, no matter what the situations are around us, we're gonna build the best possible conditions in our bubble, in our kaiaulu, to make sure to nurture and allow everyone to thrive. We're acknowledging the need to care for it no matter what is happening around us. How do we make space for this kind of stuff? And then Hawaii tells us that Hawaii is our prize place, that we show love and appreciation for our beloved home called Hawaii, right? And we nurture this place because the one thing that every single one of us have in common is that we're living here in Hawaii. No matter where you're from, no matter what your background is, you're here. You're living, teaching, working, feeling, loving here in Hawaii, right? And so how do we use that as that foundation, that pa that connects all of us and builds upon that? How do we help our communities realize their abundance? How do we help all of our students and all of our children and all of the ones that we are helping in this world? How do we help them to realize their abundance, their internal individual abundance, as well as the abundance of all of their community around them, right? How do we continue to uplift the mo'olelo of this place and the host culture, as well as the multicultural societies that contribute to this place as examples of thriving people and thriving communities, right? And then how are we utilizing all of those mo'olelo to really create the most relevant of experiences? So when we have conversations, they're really meaningful and people want to keep coming back to us for those types of conversations, right? It's not a one and done. We continue to grow from there. Now, Hopena A is asking us each to take a look in our own spaces and in our environments to figure out what are the indicators that tell us that Ha is really happening. How do we know? Ha's nothing new. It's been ingrained in this place for generations, right? And so how do we know if somebody feels a sense of belonging? What are the cues that tell us it's happening? How do we know if someone sees their responsibility as a privilege, right? And then if we see that it's growing and it's strengthened, what are the conditions that allow that to happen? And then how do we do more of that? How do you provide more of those conditions, right? If it's not strengthened, what are the conditions that are maybe hindering it? How do we get rid of those and build in the ones that'll help to strengthen breath for everyone in all of our spaces? Yeah. What are the indicators in your own practice, in your own spaces? How would you know that the people that you're working with and you're engaging with feel this sense of breath when they're with you? How do you know that they don't? And then what are you doing about it? How are we shifting, right? How are we shifting from the me mentality to the we mentality that tells us when we make decisions, it's for the betterment of the collective whole. It's kako, everyone included. Two-legged, four-legged, aina, seen and unseen, right? This image here is asking us to really look at moving from a system mindset to an ecosystem mindset, where na Hopena A are the conditions that allow this ecosystem to thrive. It doesn't say that one side of the image is better than the other. It just says that they experience different conditions. So what does the left side need more of, right? What does the right side need more of? And how do we input those in our practices in order to allow both to truly thrive in the way that best suits them, each of them, right? What are those conditions that produce outcomes, that the desirable outcomes for Hawaiʻi? And how are we purposely making designs for this? Okay. How do we build on these indicators and these conditions so that everyone, including yourselves, can feel a strengthened sense of breath in everything that we're doing? Some of the things that I ask you folks to take into consideration is, what are the stories of your community? What are all of the gifts of your community? And when you say community, however you define community, it could be your physical community, it could be your community of practitioners, the community that you serve or that serves you, right? That you serve with. How might you create opportunities in your practice for everyone to have a more relevant and meaningful experience when they're with you? Yeah. And then what are some things that you might implement immediately in your practice in order to strengthen that personal sense of breath, yeah, for yourself as well as for your larger community? So when we think about na Hopena A, again, like I said, it's about the mo'olelo. Yeah. Are we uplifting the stories that truly matter for the people that we're working with and the communities that we're working in? And are we allowing those stories to be the stories that drive what we do, so we don't fall into the danger of a single story? Chimamanda Adichie tells us about the danger of a single story, where too often we allow textbooks and other people from far away to tell our stories. How are we making sure that we are the ones telling our stories, right? That we are the ones uplifting our keiki so they can feel confident enough to go out into the world and hold true to their mo'olelo. I'm gonna pause there and I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. And I'm gonna open up for any questions or any thoughts that anybody might have. Anything that's really standing out for you, anything that's resonating, any of that. You can go ahead and type it in the chat, maybe. Then we can take a moment to address that. While we wait to see if there are any questions that come up. As I mentioned, na Hopena A was established, the establishment of na Hopena A was headed up by a former Board of Education member, Cheryl Ka'uhane Lupenui, who got together stakeholders from across Hawaii from all walks of life, not just formal DOE stakeholders, but all across Hawaii as well as beyond, to really take a look at what is it that we need to put in place. And one of the biggest goals was, how do we put something in place that can transcend beyond just the formal education system, but like I said, can become a model for how we do things across everything that we do here in Hawaii, right? And so one of the biggest things that we're trying to really encourage in our schools and in our communities is the need for those strengthened relationships between kaiaulu and formal school settings, right? The need to minimize the cultural dissonance that's happening and the code switching that children need to go through when they go from their homes to their schools, to their communities, to their sports, whatever it may be, and allow them to see familiar faces, to hear familiar thoughts, and to really experience things that tether to a familiar story, right? So they don't feel as lost, and the gap can be closed a little bit more with every given experience. Yeah. We have a question here. Do we have suggestions or links, articles? Yes. So I will put it in the chat. This is our website. It's the Ohe Hub. It's bit.ly Hawaii Education Hub. And you can go there and it has links to all of the Nahopana'o stuff. It has links to all of the work that we do in communities to uplift Olelo Hawaii. It has links to just guiding principles for grounding to Hawaiian ways of knowing through Aina Aloha, and so on and so forth. So please feel free to go there. It has our articles, all of the past articles that have been done with regards to Nahopana'o. And if you have any questions or would like to talk more with me about any of this, I'm putting my email in the chat, and you are more than welcome to contact me for any reason, whether it's just to talk story or if you want some kokua with some of the work you folks are doing. We don't only service the Department of Education. Yeah, we're here for our kaiaulu, our larger Hawaii kaiaulu. So anything we can do to kako you folks, please don't hesitate to let us know. Yep, definitely, Vernon. The hope is that the message of Nahopana'o is Hawaii for all, not Hawaii for Hawaiians only, right? One of the biggest misconceptions, especially in our education system and our legislative system, is that when we have Hawaiian words and things or Hawaiian concepts, that it's only for the Hawaiians, and even more specifically for those active Hawaiians, right? But Nahopana'o tells us that there's space in this for everyone. There's space in this for everyone because it's the essence of Hawaii. Yeah, and we're saying that utilizing Olelo Hawaii and Mo'olelo Hawaii can help us get there because of the multiple perspectives that it allows us to see, right? Other Western mentality, it's very individual, egocentric, singular-minded. Hawaii, all things Hawaii, have multiple perspectives and multiple ways of looking at things, and context really matters, right? So it allows us to be really flexible, right? So like in the video, it says that Nahopana'o allows each community to do what works best for them, using the same language, but defining it in their own way, right? So yes, definitely. Yes, the gift-based system, quote, everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's unable. Yes, 100%, 100%. So how do we make those spaces to allow that fish to know that it's a fish, and that fish have great wealth in our community, right? And great value in our community, and that they matter. Yes, if you would like me to share your slide, I can save the chat after this. So if you would like me to share my slides with you folks, if you wouldn't mind just putting your email address in the chat, and I'll make sure to capture that and email it directly to all of you. Oh, mahalo, Sharon. Yeah, mahalo. It's easy to be genuine when it's something that we're truly passionate about and we believe in, and ultimately something that we connect to, right? Because it's a part of my story. So mahalo to all of you. I know I can't see your faces, but just from the fact that you folks are in this conference and are interested in this work, I know that you're doing beautiful things and are really doing the work that oftentimes goes unnoticed and unthanked. And so I just want to say mahalo nui a ʻoukou pakahia pau for everything that you do. Yep. What are some of the successes of Hopena A in influencing public school kumu? You know, I want to say that one of our most successful middle schools as far as outwardly communicating their shift in implementing Hopena A is a military school. Yeah, Wheeler Middle School here on Oʻahu has gone leaps and bounds from when we first met with them. And that was really because of the faculty and staff and their connection, their feeling of connection to this sense of belonging. Most importantly, sense of belonging. Right. And so because the faculty and staff are buying into it, not just at that school, but schools across the state, because the faculty and staff are being given opportunities to experience things that hit them personally, right? And they see relevance in the story for themselves, they want to do something about it, right? So every complex area in our public school system has implemented Hopena A in some way, shape, or form, but HA is all about being ready. So we don't go where we're not invited, right? We don't force HA where we're not invited, because the understanding is if you're inviting me, then you have some level of readiness to truly hear what I have to say, right? And how do we take that approach with our keiki too? That's not to say that we don't need to require them to do things, but we need to calibrate our expectations, right? If we're forcing ourselves in there, if we're forcing our content in there, our experiences, our talks, whatever it may be, then are we truly justified in expecting all the way up here from them, as opposed to allowing them to invite us physically, figuratively, literally into their spaces. Some of the biggest impacts is Kumu during this COVID pandemic really banded together across the Pai'aina to create virtual experiences and to collaborate with one another so that they didn't lose sight of the essence of Ha in this virtual setting. They've created Padlets and Kumu from Kona on Moko Keawe. We're collaborating with Kumu on Kauai to create lessons and all of these things because they thought it was important enough to make sure that we continued in our spaces. With that said, there's also Kumu who aren't there yet, right? But that's just because they may not have had an experience that have impacted them in a way to make them feel connected to it. So if you know of any Kumu like that in your, oh yeah, so many Kumu have said, I wish we had this before. Once they have an experience, right? One of the things that we find is a lot of the schools, they have the poster, they have all these things out there, even community members. Oh yeah, I heard of that HA stuff, right? But I don't really know what it is. It's just on my walls. Okay? Until they actually talk story with us or have an experience with a community partner like some of you, they don't realize it. And when they do, though, they say, gosh, this is long overdue, right? Especially those veteran Kumu who have been in the system for so long, waiting for this, and are just so jaded by all of the false promises that they've experienced throughout their tenure, right? And so how might we as a community, as a collective community, allow them to see that it's not only happening in the classrooms, that it's happening in all of these spaces, right? And the more that we can share a similar language around the importance of these essential practices, right? Hopena A is not supplemental, it's foundational. Whether you call it Ha or not, the essence of breath is foundational, should be foundational. So how do we continue to communicate that in all of the things that we do? So when they go to their grocery store, when they go to their doctor's office, when they go to where they hear newscasts on their TV, or they see a commercial, Ha is constantly being reiterated to them. Mahalo so much for all of your kind words. It's truly a pleasure for me to be here, and I know we're at our time now. And so I'd like to ask you folks, if you don't mind real quick, to go back to that Mentimeter I'll put it back in the chat. And just before you leave our meeting space here today, if you can go back to the Mentimeter and I lost it on my screen. And answer the final question that comes up. You should be seeing what is one word that describes how you feel about Ha for your practice? Yeah. So as you make your way out of this session, if you can go in there and just type that up. And for those of you who put your email in, you'll get the Mentimeter back from me. But other than that, mahalo nui a oko pakahia pau no ko loko mai kai a ko aloha nui no kia lahui o Hawaiʻi nei. Yeah, aloha.
Aloha, everyone. Another special mahalo for our beautiful presentation today and all the wisdom shared. We are going to be on break from 11:45 until 11:50.